Hatem, welcome to BizTalk. That's my great pleasure having me today. How are you?
I'm fine. Looking forward to talking to you, Max. Always good to talk to a man with a smile.
The pleasure is mine. Yeah, I like to smile. I mean, that's fine. Thank you. So let's start talking a bit about yourself, a little bit your background, your done so far, your experience.
Depends how many centuries you want to go back. I came over here from Canada in the 70s and spent the greater part of my career in what used to be called corporate communications. I don't see that mentioned in quite that term anymore. But anyway, that's what it was. I set up my own publishing company in 1989, got into healthcare publishing in London's Harley Street for 10, 15 years or so. And all the while, I was developing a greater and greater interest in London. I might have started by saying I came over here because my family was very much an Anglophile family. We loved everything about London and English and Scottish history. So I came over here thinking I might stay here for 2 or 3 years, and the city captured me. I decided I'd stay on, and I don't think I would have thought at the time I'd be staying on for my entire life, but it looks as if I'm here for the duration. So I've always been a great fan of English history. My academic training was in philosophy and history. And so it seems that after a year of doing various things in corporate communications and fintech and financial marketing and hospitality and so on, I've landed really where my home was, where I started, still in publishing, but with a focus upon history and culture.
I mean, London, UK as a whole, has so much to do, right? And to offer when it
That's
comes
right.
to history. So you got in the very right place, London.
Yeah. I might have gone to Rome, come to think of it. That's another favorite city of mine, but I preferred London because I can speak English better than I can speak Italian.
I mean, Rome is is a little bit more complicated without question. But yes, Rome as well has so much to say.
Yeah.
But let's focus on London and UK history. So
Okay.
let's start talking about your venture startup, which is have been really your website is so exciting. It's beautiful.
Well, that's always good to hear. Would you like to say that again?
I love history. I don't know that much about London and UK as I know about Italy and Rome, of course, because I was born there. But as I said before, London was born and before the Romans invaded. So we are talking about such a long history, right? So let's start talking about the focus you have on your,
Yeah.
regard your business and regard the history.
Well,
And
it's sure it's been quite intense these last 2 years, partly because of COVID. Like everybody else, we've been working in a lockdown way and seeing the world changing around us. So that the Cradle of English that I started with, and which is still very much obvious there on the website, was the history of Fleet Street's printing presses between 1500 and 1700 mostly, um, and coming to terms with the reality that while everybody thinks that Fleet Street is about journalism and newspapers, we were discovering that with all those printing presses, it was very much about the language itself, the legal profession, the monasteries that were there before Henry VIII changed his mind about one or two things. And that led to an explosion in publishing, and the English language itself saw this tremendous growth between 1500, when it was one of the minor European languages, and 1700, again, even before the newspapers came into play. By 1700, in those 200 years, English had moved to being one of the top one or two languages in the world, largely because of those printing presses powering away in less than half a square mile of Fleet Street. Dictionaries, Bibles, of course, all those law texts. There have always been hundreds of lawyers working in Fleet Street because it was outside of the authority of the City of London, but not quite so close to Westminster and the seat of political power that their lives were quite as much at risk as they might otherwise have been. So anyway, there was a great big concentration of lawyers developing there, and therefore a huge market for books when the printing presses took off. So all of that was fascinating. Then came COVID, and we saw the global tourism industry tank, and explosion in edtech interest and streaming theater and entertainment and so on. And while we remained we still remain fascinated by the relationship of the growth of language and publishing and the growth of English culture, we've also had to look at new things that we wouldn't otherwise have looked at without COVID. What's happening with the online tourism, with the tourism industry, with immersive technologies such as virtual and artificial reality, virtual technology, artificial intelligence, computer-generated images, all of these technologies that can bring people into an experience, gives them a sense of actually being in a place, if that's what you want to do, if you wanted to develop an online tourism model and open up the history so people have a sense of walking through the 18th century street. This is creating horizons for us that we hadn't contemplated when we set out 2 years ago. All of a sudden it's there. And of course, more streaming and opportunity for experiential retail, as they say, not just going shopping online, but shopping online in the 18th century. How cool is that? Or how cool would that be once we get better invested? So all of a sudden, these opportunities start growing out and building out. And where it's come to a focus, and then I suppose I should allow you to tee up another question. But where it came to a particularly sharp focus is just a month ago with this so-called Immersio we've launched. We called it Immersio rather than a video or an online tour, because the viewer or the visitor can immerse themselves in the history, walking up a short little alley that some people who know London would know of, Crane Court, one of the many alleys that comes off the north side of Fleet Street. It's scarcely 100 yards long, Max. But in that 100 yards, you've got 300 years of fascinating history, with publications starting there that most people will have heard of, Punch Magazine and Illustrated London News. But critically, the Royal Society had its first permanent home at the top of Crane Court. So people can walk up a 21st century street and see the building that Isaac Newton moved into when the Royal Society set up there. And the story I like to tell about all of this is that while he came out of Fleet Street and walked up Crane Court, he would have passed a gallows that was sitting there for 130 years. And I know this is correlation and not causation, but it is a neat fact that by the time the Royal Society had been doing science in Crane Court for 70 odd years, when they moved out to their next London address, the gallows were gone. We were getting a bit more civilized. The science that happened in the 18th century was reflected in what was actually happening around Crane Court as well. And that's pretty largely a message for all of Fleet Street. The English Enlightenment took off and the printing presses worked there. It was history in real time, dynamic. And it's led us to where we are now, contemplating how London might move beyond Brexit, beyond COVID, and reestablish itself as the center of the world that it was. With or without anybody's idea of what global Britain might be. I think global Britain might have to reassess exactly what it means by soft power and ask itself whether it wants more universities or more aircraft carriers. But that's a contentious area that we don't get into a whole lot. With Fleet Street, we've got the basis of something very, very powerful in terms of not just for Fleet Street in London, but for all the world, learning how to talk with one another. And that's what I think English can do.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe English today is the most well-known language worldwide, backed by a huge history. And yes, I mean, they've been very smart and, writing and speaking between the 15th, 17th century has been what gave to the English the power, right? The soft power that today English has. There is nothing to do. But I'm very curious. How did you manage to put together writing, literature, speaking, and also the technology? Okay, I saw on your website you're adopting augmented reality, for example, for a better feeling, walking to the street and see what is surrounding you, and also how do you exactly attract people, users coming to your platform or using your services, and how do you integrate your services to tourism, for example?
Sorry, integrated services to what?
To tourists.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, I won't dwell on what our strategy was at the beginning when we thought that we would be one type of business, attracting tourists and taking £2 off every tour in real time with people walking around the real streets. What we're looking at now is sort of a three-pronged approach. The first one that we've been working with since day one is key influencers, friends, working social media to make contacts and people spreading the word further and further out. Secondly, one of the things that, one of the many things, Max, that I've learned with some pleasant surprise about Fleet Street is how many world-class businesses there are in the area.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the filters on our homepage map, we started with where were the old printing presses? Where were the monasteries and the churches and so on? Where were the first novels published? Where were the pubs that were there then and are there now? But then we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see how many big businesses there are in the Fleet Street area? And we found that although it's scarcely half a square mile, there are upwards of 30 world-class headquarters or European headquarters in this area. And they're all pretty much in what people generally call the creative or the knowledge industries, intellectual property, licensing, design, technology design, consultancy with Deloitte, top consultants company in the world, just literally paces around the corner from Dr. Johnson's house, where the first dictionary was found. The DNA of creativity is in the area, and it's reflected in the companies that are now. So I'm thinking, well, while we're being innovative and we're wondering how to define innovation in the 21st century, here are all these fantastic world-class names that are there doing the same thing. I think we're going to have an audience working with in partnership with these people, defining exactly how innovation is going to redefine itself as the decades go by. And it's not just Deloitte, the list goes on. Goldman Sachs and Amazon are kitty corner across Holborn Viaduct. They could throw a stone from either building and hit any one of a number of million windows in the other guy's headquarters. It's an extremely tight little neighborhood of very, very bright people doing some fascinating things. So that's audience number 2. And then audience number 3 is how we grow out through the social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, we're on Patreon as well for anybody that wants to subscribe and support us right there. And through all these channels, we're getting the message out. And in this technology space, I'm finding some of the best communicators, because going back over 30 or 40 years in communication, in corporate communications, I can say that there are lots of people that are very good at whatever that is they do, but they're not so good at communicating what they do. And I'm a great believer in working with people that are good at whatever their task is, but they've also got a certain penchant or capability in terms of defining their audience, reaching their audience, and so on.
I had the pleasure of being acting for 10 years in Rome in theater. And my teacher told me there is a huge difference between talk and communicate, right? 99.9% of the people, they talk, but they do not communicate at all. It was right.
Absolutely, that's right. And that's reflected in another interesting fact about the legal community in Fleet Street, that, of course, on the English distinction of barristers and solicitors, the barristers have long had public speaking and drama as part of their training, because they've got to get up and stand there and be convincing in a way that maybe a solicitor doesn't have to be. So it's because of the barristers in the legal district of Fleet Street, all these the Inns of Chancery, as they were, that were and the Inns of Court. They had to learn to speak properly, so they were a huge audience for the Elizabethan playwrights. Shakespeare and so on, with all his plays in the area and down on the South Bank at the Globe and so on. It's arguable that Elizabethan theatre wouldn't have taken off as it did do if it weren't for all those lawyers, and particularly the barristers that learned how to speak the speech I pray you as I pronounce it to you.
I mean, I love it because I did, but let me tell you, that's a very good help, right? I remember, I'm close because that's you and not me. I remember when we started acting, and I'm not an actor because I gave up after 10 years and I went to finance, which is completely different. But the teacher told, we were 44 the first day, okay? It told us maybe I'm not sure, would be an actor, professional actor. All of you go home. But let me tell you, whatever is going to happen when you talk, we will talk. And people will listen to you. It was very funny. I'm not an actor at all. I hope people will listen to me, but just to strengthen what you're talking about.
That makes total sense. I thought you might have said that your teacher said one of you will be an actor, the other 43 will become barristers.
I'm not, but it's somehow a lot to be. It's a very I love the job very much. pretty much.
Yeah.
But
Well, you're doing very well with it, I've got to say.
thank you. And let me now you are in between virtual online, but COVID is, we hope, will end completely. We're still not there. Are you going back also to the kind of welcoming tourists on the street again?
Well, we never got to a point that we were doing that, Max. That was part of the early ambition. I think that there are so many people doing tours in the West End. We would certainly be interested in doing anything we can to help them and to promote people that want to come back. But there is another issue that we haven't touched upon: is where is the tourism industry going, even with the end of COVID? Because we're looking at climate change, and do we want to be sending plane loads of people from elsewhere to come to London and take selfies in front of St. Paul's? What we're interested in doing is more of an educative, making people aware of all the glories of London without necessarily coming here.
I do believe this is a duty. Everyone should experience London, and so I think you're doing an extremely great job, because London is absolutely beautiful. I came to London 7 years ago. I'm still there. And I tried to work away 2 times. I came back again. There's a kind of addiction in London, because the beauty of London is maybe Rome, Paris in Europe can be something close to, but I'm not there.
Absolutely, I agree.
So what about your business model, and how do you manage to sustain your business? How do you make money out of it?
Well, there's now and the future. Now is that this is a startup, bootstrapped by its 2 founders, my wife Bernice, whom you've been talking to, who does our social media and thankfully does our books so that I don't have to. So the 2 of us have been investing all the pre-seed investment in terms of cash in and also opportunity cost and salary deferred and all the rest of that. That's been all us. We've been joined by a couple of people who are working with us because they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They've got the bug, as it were. They're as inspired as we are. But we're all of us looking forward to generating revenue as quickly as possible through the channels I described by implication earlier, working with the corporates, working for institutional funds, developing a subscription base, either through Patreon or building advertising and subscription models on social media and Google advertising and so on. That's where we see the money coming from down the track. I think there's an even further down the track model if we develop to the extent that we develop a technology play, if you like, with immersive augmented reality technology that enables people to discover Fleet Street. There's no reason why we shouldn't establish a template, technology protocol that can be sold as a marketing template to San Francisco or to Jakarta, maybe even to Rome.
Of course. It's a bit complicated, Rome, but why not? It's more complicated to walk through Rome.
Yes.
But yes, of course, can be done. How exactly are you going to work with these corporates, for example? There are so many corporates in Fleet Street. How do you think your collaboration with them can be established?
That's the most succinct, greatest articulation of that question I've had so far. That's a typical barrister's trick, I think. What a great question, Max. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, what am I going to say? Well, what I would say in answer to that is that in looking for things that would appeal to the corporates, to have them talk to us, rather than just go to them and say, would you like to stick your corporate brand on my little immersio of a panopticon walk up Salisbury Court? We can still do that. But in finding common cause with the corporates, I think the key, again, has come very largely from COVID and post-Brexit, that we're finding common cause in this notion of innovation. You will not find very many corporates in Fleet Street or anywhere else, particularly these days, and particularly if they're in the knowledge and creative industries, that won't have innovation or something to do with innovation on their website. So we come along and we say, well, we're Christmas come early for you, pal, because our whole business is about innovation. And the DNA of innovation that's been in Fleet Street since London had to recover from the plague, the Dutch invasion, the Civil War, the fire, It managed it pretty well then, and then actually they managed it without a whole lot of talk about innovation, and they managed it without having a single business school. So the DNA is there. We're applying that DNA to flesh out what do we mean by innovation. Okay, well that still begs the question. Okay, smart guy Tam, what do you do? What do you mean by innovation? Well, we've come along at a good time because we see that the United Nations has got its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We've got COP26 coming up in Glasgow next week. Yes, next week. Yes. So there's an awful lot of talk around how do we sustain and improve on and build the planet to a point that we can carry on enjoying more equitable, healthy, peaceful life for everybody on Earth without actually despoiling the Earth. And the 17 goals are wonderfully crafted. Support one, you support all of them, but there are about half a dozen of them that we've isolated as being particularly relevant to the urban space, to do with urban regeneration, the greening and sustainability of green spaces, quality education, and getting people back to work in a sustainable way. And we've got a number of ideas for that. Some of them we've come up with ourselves. Some of them we just nicked from Isaac Newton and the boys of the Royal Society 200 years ago. So again, it's out there in the DNA. We can take these and apply them to the modern world, working with corporates to build. So it's a bit oversimplified to say work with them to build the corporate videos of the future, but to establish the communication plans that enable them to say, who are our stakeholders? Not just our shareholders, our stakeholders. And in that broadest sense that's addressed by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we're talking about all of humanity has the same questions. Who are the stakeholders of humanity? How can we work together on this in such a way as sustains and improves the world? So that's come along at a good time for us, and I think that will be the basis of our dialogues. We can go to somebody like a Lego. I mean, how many people know that Lego is sitting up off the north end of Fleet Street? Another of these world-class businesses in our patch, and we can go to them and say, not give us £5,000 to sponsor an immersio on the history of science. Although I am talking to somebody at Lego, and I have playfully said over a beer that maybe he would like to do that, and I'll get back to you when he tells me his answer. But more importantly, we can go to people like this chap and say, would you like to contribute to our podcast series? We've got the podcast series on our website. It's been sitting there quietly because with COVID, we haven't been able to get panels of people together. Because I don't trust doing this sort of thing with 4 people or more. We want to be able to do it face to face, and anyway, that's a technical challenge. But the Mitre Knights, so-called on our website, is named for a tavern that was swallowed up by history. One of the great private banks, C. Hoare & Co., took over the Mitre Tavern, and so I've used the word because I can use it without somebody coming to me for copyright infringement. So we use the Mitre Knights, and we're developing it as a series of podcasts focused upon innovation in the Fleet Street area, but growing out into the country, focused on innovation, but addressing particularly the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as they apply to an urban space such as London and the big companies that work in it. And I bet you might be a cynical investor that says, well, I'll believe it when I see it, in which case, as an investor, you will have lost your money because you didn't get in on the ground floor. But my bet would be that they will talk on that basis. And once we got relations with them because they're contributing to our panels, then maybe we can find a couple of them that would put some money into one of our products. So reciprocity and sustainability.
I mean, I do believe what you're doing is great. And yes, you're right. We are in this space now. We need to get sustainable in any way possible. And you got this beautiful street, which can be, the heart. It is the heart of London and can spread up all over the world. So it's very fascinating what they're doing because, I mean, when I came to London, Fleet Street was, I don't know how many times I went there. And as I told you before starting this talk, I didn't know what discovered today through your website. So it's and I didn't know how many companies were there. So it's extremely fascinating. It's more fascinating what you are building on top of this, right? All the business and the knowledge and the working together, ventures and whatsoever, we are working on top of this beautiful street. Short but beautiful. You talk about investors. Please talk.
Well, I was just going to say, we think we've got a good model, but we're not under any illusion that we're the only people thinking about this. It's interesting, by the way, that of those 17 sustainable development goals, the last one is working in partnership. So it's almost like whichever of the other 16 goals you're focused on, we're going to do it in a spirit of partnership rather than people doing their own thing. So we notice as we look around London, we've got the Culture Mile, which was developed by the City of London Corporation, focused upon the area that's going to be the new Museum of London and the Barbican around there. We've got the Fleet Street Quarter, which with whom we're talking about leading a bid, a so-called business improvement district application to the City of London. And there are quite a few of these bid districts around the country, in fact. We're extremely interested in working with people like that because we share objectives. And there's no point in them trying to do what they're doing without being aware of what we're doing. And the reverse is true as well. So working in partnership with these people and other bids. So it's not just us working with the corporates, it's us working with other associations and indeed the universities that are under various financial pressures. And I'm very keen to work with those people because being the son of academics myself, I'm critically aware of how hard university professors work to get their knowledge out there without having hosts of investors like you behind them.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about investments. You are, I presume, raising some money. And how much do you have in mind to raise? And do you have any message to investors? If, I'm okay, I'm raising this amount of money, or why they should give you the money? Why should invest in your venture?
Well, I'll come to the first question second. The first one, in terms of the why, I think is really important because this is a different sort of pitch that I would have than the one I would have put out when I was 25 or 35, where there's everybody's hard-nosed about their business model and KPIs and returns and all the rest of this, and what's your 5-year plan and your exit strategy and all the rest of that. What makes this really no, that's okay. So I think what's particularly neat about this is that this business, because of the things I've already done, this business came along at a time when I could do it because I loved it. I've always been attracted to the businesses I've done, but I've got to say, I've never been as enamored of any business as I am impassioned about this one. So I like to work with people who share that passion. So if I have a special message to investors, the obvious one is invest in my business, make some money. But going back to the other question and the why, come into this business because you really believe in it and you think, my gosh, what an exciting business this is going to be associated with. Which is almost to say, if you just want to come in and make money and you're not really interested in it, you might as well be investing in howdy-doody plastic bouncing clowns. Then go invest in the clowns and don't bother me and I won't bother you. But if you can share the passion, join us. To go back to your other question about what are we raising, we feel that we've got the T-shirt for pre-seed. We've put our own money in to this extent, but in order to build the sort of things that we need to build with the sort of money that we will need to build it, we need semi-serious money to create the minimum viable product that can scale at proper investment level. When we say, okay, you've got your prototype Emersio walk-up crane court. Now we build the minimum viable product, which extends that and builds the model out into the technology that's needed to scale the business across all of London. At that point, we're looking for, at this stage with the seed round, 500,000. And my ideal, if I could write the script, if the investors would actually let me write the script of their investment, it would not be one person with 500,000, although one never says no, right? My perfect script would be 5 people to come in with 100,000 each one of them rivaling me in their enthusiasm for what we're doing. And then we'll have some fun talking together at the pub about the next stage and where we're going to take this thing and how this is going to grow into Northern England and across to France. What we would raise at that stage, of course, we would have to see. But right now, I'm looking for 5 people. I found one. I'm looking for 4. And if the next question is by when, Uh, 20 minutes time would be nice, but we'll settle for early 2022.
Okay. Let me close. I do hope you will get all you need and you deserve. Let me close with, what's your vision for the future of your business?
Well, it's a vision that depends to some extent upon the context in which the question is asked. So it would be a different answer if we were talking about what can we contribute to the development of all this fascinating immersive technology, because that's very much the future in terms of just commodities and inventing stuff. You know, the new cameras and what AI is going to do to the development of scripts and so on. And the idea of investing in avatars, the artificial intelligence needed to turn a basic Siri or Alexa type avatar into a walking Dr. Johnson who can sit in the pub and talk to a walking Shakespeare about a walking Chaucer. Although none of these people ever existed at the same time, you can have all these people talking together driven by AI. So that would be one type of vision. The other type of vision is the idea that through virtual tourism and edtech, we can actually, in the best sense of the word, educate the world to understand in a much richer, more informed way what an incredibly beautiful planet is we've got. What a fantastic opportunity we all have, all 8 billion of us, to lead a fulfilled life. We won't need the United Nations to set out goals for us to do what we should have been doing for each other anyway. So that's more of a big picture vision. Locally, I'd say my third local vision is I want to get to a point where there's enough money and resource behind this business that I can take my beautiful wife with me on holiday, but because we've been working very hard at this.
I really wish you. I mean, it's been a very huge pleasure talking to you, Tom. And I'm back in London on Sunday because I'm not in London now, right now. And I hope we can have a cup of tea very soon because I really enjoyed talking to you. And I wish you all the best for the development of your company and reaching all the success you need and you deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a look at the pubs on our website. There are quite a few pubs for us to drink in. As they say, so many pubs, so little time.
I mean, we take a look and I will write you where we are going to.
Okay, I look forward to that.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Max. Cheers.
Bye.